Hey everyone, welcome to the Eat to Win show where sports nutrition meets peak performance. Get ready for expert insights, real stories, and tips to help you win with every meal. Let's dive in.
Hi, and welcome to the Eat to Win podcast show. My name is Tavis Piatoli. Today, I am your host, and we're here to talk about all things sports nutrition and how we help athletes win. Whether you're an athlete or just passionate about nutrition and performance, this is the place to be. Today, we're thrilled to have an incredible guest with us. Joining us is Tyson Gunter. He's a Team USA Paralympian in track and field who will share how he trained his body to achieve peak performance and represent his country at the highest level of competition. Let's jump right in. Tyson, thank you so much for having you here, for being with us and really joining our team. Looking forward to really interviewing you and just learning more about your experience.
I'm excited too, Tavis. Something that you may or may not know, I've been in the shadows following you and the sports dietitians and Eat to Win symposiums or whatever you call them for a while. So the content you put out has been partial in shaping my nutrition. You know, I've had access to some dietitians, but also I like to dabble in my own, which we'll get into, kind of my own stuff too. And learning from you through the different content you're putting out has been really cool. So thanks for all you're doing on that side.
Really appreciate it. Thank you so much for following us. We really appreciate that. And it's always good to have people like yourself that have been following us on the show and kind of talking about your experience. So let's kind of dive right into this. And, you know, first of all, I want to kind of learn about what inspired you to kind of pursue track and field. What really got you into that area of interest, and especially at the elite level? And how did you kind of adapt to your training to become a Paralympian? And tell us that story.
Yeah, so I was born with albinism, which is I don't have pigment in my skin, so I have the white hair and light skin, but it also affects my vision. So I'm technically legally blind. I do have some vision. I like to reference it as in if you had a pair of binoculars and you flipped around and looked through them backwards, it's far away. That's the best representation I can give without having known how normal people see. But I've always loved sports. I'm the youngest of 7. And so all my older siblings are very athletic. My parents were athletic. A few of my siblings went on to compete in college. And so just growing up, it was what we did. We were dairy farmers. So it's like there was time to be athletic and there was time to work. So it was what we did. It was what our hobbies were, where we lived. And so just seeing that, just generally wanting to be an athlete. And, every kid wants to be a professional athlete. And then it slowly shifted from, NBA, NFL, all the major sports. And then a couple of my brothers were competing in college track, the 96 Olympics, watching Michael Johnson run in the 200 and 400, break world records and win gold medals. Like all of that has just kind of culminated into my desire for athletics.
Excellent. Yeah, no, that's impressive. And it's really admiring just to kind of learn more about what you've done and what you've experienced. Were there any early moments in your life that, in your athletic journey where you were like, hey, this is going to help shape my mindset for pursuing these goals, and especially towards training and overcoming those challenges? How did you overcome some of those challenges? Because like you said, legally blind or, that's going to deter someone right away from wanting to pursue most things. So how did you overcome that?
Stubbornness, I think. Because I saw the success that my siblings were having and the support they gave and my parents, and there was times when I was maybe held back because of my vision, but really I was able to do anything I wanted. And I went to a public school in a rural community, so I had a lot of support, and I really didn't know, to be honest, and maybe I didn't accept what the vision disability was actually, how it was holding me back, right? It wasn't until I got into high school and more higher level basketball and football to realize like I'm really at a disadvantage, but I never saw myself as a disadvantage. I was like just hard on myself of like, I'm not doing it good enough. I'm not trying hard enough. I'm not all of this, right? So a little bit of self-acceptance kind of helped me transition into track and field, and I didn't even care to do track and field in college. I wanted to play football. I did switch to kicking in football, which, it's a long story, but like it seems counterintuitive, but with my vision, that was something that I felt like I could do. But ultimately track and field became the thing that was like, I'm continuing to excel at this as I get older. And I got support, and maybe this is where the direction I should go.
Yeah. Now, this takes mental resilience. Like you said, you were stubborn. How would you describe your mental resilience required to train at the level as a Paralympian, and how did you cultivate that resilience over time?
I think your statement of over time is huge in this situation. Being on a dairy farm, we learned to work hard at a young age, and I was probably the lazy one, but still to the general public, I still work hard, but in the family, maybe I was more lazy than everybody else. But I think that, and then going through high school, just seeing my cousins that I worked with on the farm, they were pretty motivating. And, between feeding calves and moving pipe or whatever, we'd go run little hills, or we had a little weight room in the barn in the back. So when we had a half hour downtime, we'd go do the bench press or whatever, right? We'd lift random objects, tractor parts or whatever. So just kind of that over time. And then getting into the Paralympics, like I started late. I didn't even know about it, that there was a vision classification. And for those that don't know, Paralympics is elite performance for those with physical disabilities. So, we have the same expectations or training regiments and rules and resources as traditional Olympians that most people are familiar with at the elite level, but we have the physical disabilities. And so that's the difference. And we're not to be confused with Special Olympics, which is more of, all-inclusive mental disability sport. But anyway, where I was going with that is I didn't find out till it was later. So I went through all of my college career, competed in college, go Bengals, went to Idaho State, and didn't find out about till later. So some of your questions are maybe for me, like I'm trying to transition, like how did I do that as what we call able-bodied athletes? And then once I got into Paralympic track and field, I was an adult. So things were a little bit different for me.
Yeah. With this type of level, it takes a lot of focus, motivation, confidence. And you've mentioned a lot of these things already, but are there any strategies that you took or a mental framework that you really relied on to stay focused and motivated to connect, keep pursuing your dreams? Because a lot of people give up on that kind of stuff. And, you went to the highest level to continue to do that. So, I guess my question would be how'd you continue that, and what kept you motivated?
What's kept me motivated, I think, is the drive for me to be successful. I always felt like I could do better and be better. And, even I had some success in college, but still never achieved what I felt like I could achieve. And then when I found out about the opportunity to compete in the Paralympics at the elite level, it was just like, let's go, right? Let's see what we can do. And so I think, like, it's hard to explain because I've been thinking about this for a while, and I think it's little things over time has generated that drive within me, but I just don't feel like I've achieved what I want to accomplish. And so it motivates me to continue to compete. And then, on the other side, because I'm, in the sports world, I'm older at 38. Part of it is I feel like this lifestyle is motivating me to eat better. Like, I love food and treats and candy and junk food, but I eat better because I'm motivated to compete and to perform at my best. And so part of part of that is just to say, hey, I need to be healthy. And if I'm just sitting at home and, don't have anything to motivate me, I'm probably not going to be that healthy.
Sure. Yeah. As you know, nutrition plays a big role in that. Let's talk about kind of tailoring your training for elite performance. What ways did you have to customize your training routine to kind of account for your unique strengths and limitations as a Paralympian?
For sure. That's a big one. So once I graduated college and started getting into the Paralympics, I continued to work with my coach here at Idaho State, Dave Nilsson, and he was really great to continue to support me. And for those who may know track and field, he coached Stacy Dragila, who was the first women's gold medalist in the Olympics in Sydney. And so, he obviously had a wealth of knowledge and experience to continue to help me tweak my training at the higher level. And for me, it took me to tell him. So it's funny because he didn't realize I had such a bad vision disability till maybe my senior year. Right. And I would adapt the workouts to to meet my needs if I couldn't see something or I needed to change something. And because there are so many of us on the team, he didn't really notice it, or maybe he didn't pay attention or care or whatever. But as I started opening up to him, telling him a little more about it, and he was able to help me adapt some of the training, whether it's plyometrics like jumping over boxes or hurdles, or even small things like where the sun is positioned based on which way we're running. We would run the opposite way. So those little things seem, like something that a normal person isn't going to think about. But as it took me to open up, because it's hard for me to, talk about having a disability, right? And so it took me kind of open up, and then he would help me evolve and be creative about different workouts. And then using that to, do the best we can. So I had the connection, so the resource or the strength of being connected to Coach Nelson. And since then I've switched over, different coaches over the years and stuff like that. But that was a really great start for me.
Excellent. Now, you mentioned having a coach. Obviously, all Olympic athletes and have coaches and people that guide them on the training program. Let's kind of get a little bit more specific about the exercise component in that. And when you look at peak performance, it takes a certain type of training. Can you share any specific types of exercise or training adaptation that proved to be crucial for you to reach that peak performance, for the events that you participated in?
Yes. So for me, and that's evolved over time, right? And I still have a great relationship with Dave, but he went on to another different university, and then I was maybe going to retire, maybe not. And so now I did a lot of my own research, which is one of the things that I really love to do. Is I like to get into the nitty gritty of things. And I have found that essential for me is speed training, recovery, and then some sort of jump plyometric training. Those are the three things that are essential to me. And I ran across this methodology or system called Feed the Cats, Coach Tony Holler. It's most for, like, he's developed it for high school specific, and I've adapted it and evolved it over the last couple of years to work for me. And I feel like it's been a huge game changer, because we're always, and I was in this mindset too, like, work harder, work longer, spend as much time as you can in the gym, on the track, whatever. And for me specifically there, I was having a lot of injuries and a lot of overuse and a lot of things happening to me, and I couldn't figure out why. And as I started to scale back and try different training techniques and just being very essential in what I'm doing, whether it's nutrition or training or recovery, like, it's been a huge difference for me over the last couple of years.
Excellent. Let's kind of dive into a little bit of the obstacles, right? Because one of the things we know all athletes go through is they have to overcome some sort of obstacle, whether it's an injury, whether it's a setback. It happens to every single athlete, and we see that every single year. What was probably one of the most significant obstacles you faced in your training, and how did you overcome it physically and mentally?
It's a good question. I think, and maybe this is more. So going into 2021, I was planning to retire after the Tokyo Games, and because of COVID, it got pushed back a year, right? And so I was primed and I was ready to go. And this was right before I started shifting my training, and I got hurt. Blew my hamstring maybe 8 weeks out before the trials. And I was ranked, top 2 in the world in my classification in the long jump. And that destroyed me. Like, that was a mental thing for me to just, and like, I don't know. I went to a really dark place, right? And so as I came out of that, that was part of that shift in my training and my mindset, was like, if I'm going to continue to compete and try for Paris and all that stuff, I was going to have to come out of that stronger and find a different way to do things. And I found out the mental aspect, that's where one of my biggest obstacles, right? That was a specific injury that happened, but I've continued to struggle with what I call like my demons, right? With self-doubt and lack of confidence and stuff like that. And it's, you don't hear that out of a lot of elite athletes, but man, that was a big struggle for me. So I've constantly had to surround myself with people that were motivating to me, content or videos or stuff that's motivating to me, and then just take it one day at a time.
Yeah. Excellent. No, that's important to kind of mention that. And it's good to see how you overcame some of those struggles that you had. Now, when you faced those challenges, did they really change your perspective on what it means to be an athlete? And if so, how?
Yeah, because you always see the successes from athletes, right? Even me, like you don't see the hard stuff that they go through. And so I'm just sitting there thinking like, man, am I the only one that's like has self-doubt? And like, yeah, I'm in my specific realm of sport. I'm in one of the best in the world. And I'm just sitting here like, should I be here? Is it, like what's wrong with me? Right. So that shaped my perspective. And then I found out obviously later and with all the stuff that's came out over mental health and stuff over the last few years. And I think there's a balance of maybe going too far down that road but also recognizing it. Like, I'm like, oh man, there's so many other people that have these same challenges. And I think Steve Young was a great quarterback, and he talked about a lot of struggles he had. And I was like, man, like, I guess everybody deals with it.
Yeah, it is. It's every single individual that's struggling with some of those setbacks. And you see that now with athletes. It's like great athletes tear an ACL or, it's a head injury or things like that. And you can see it's mentally breaking them down, but it's something that we're going to face in life. And it's something that we're going to face in all different aspects of life, whether it's sports and just general things. Let's kind of move to the recovery longevity space, right? Being an athlete, recovery is important. For some athletes, you look at some of these athletes, it's like the Tom Brady's, the LeBron James, the Drew Breeses of the world that just have so much longevity. How did you approach recovery to ensure that longevity in your athletic career? Like you got to a level where you won the gold in 2023, especially as you continue competing at an international level. How did you actually overcome that, or not overcome that, but just what did you do to help your recovery and longevity?
I didn't for a long time. And that was a big problem. I think part of that, again, going back to just a couple years ago running across, and I'm sure we'll talk about this later, but I was contemplating retirement, and then I'm coaching high school track, but I'm just like, what? So I was actually doing research on how I can help some high school athletes and navigate the club sports, and even in a small community where we just have so many kids doing so many different sports, like how do we train them at the best level, but still make sure they don't like get overburdened or burned out, right? So I ran across this system of the Feed the Cats, and then the book Essentialism, which has nothing to do with sports, but it's just about, simplifying your life and figuring out what's essential and just focusing on the most important things and giving yourself time to recover, right? In generally, whether it's, in business, mentally, or whatever. So, Coach Tony Holler, which I've actually never met, I've talked to him a couple times, but just I took what he was saying on social media and I really internalized it. And that has been huge, where it's like you work really hard for a short amount of time, and then 99% of the time you're spending time on recovery. And then going into the Pan American Games last year, I found out I have a part of the reason why I've had so many injuries throughout my career is I have a hereditary bone, what do you call it? Like this, not disorder, but mutation, I guess, maybe, but in my hips, right? So my hips are flat. And so there's a lot of room in there. And so they whip my hip bones and joints wiggle around a lot. So it puts way more stress on my muscles than maybe your average person. And so I found out about that. So now knowing that over the last few year or so, like it's totally changed how much time I have to put into recovery.
Are there any specific techniques that you did or anything that you found was really effective to kind of help maintain that consistent high level of performance? Like if you had to maybe give, was it nutrition, was anything specific that you would really like to focus on?
I think it's the recovery aspect. I think for recovery, and then for everything else, it's testing the process of whatever I'm doing to see what works for me, right? I'm really big on, I used to say like optimization, but I don't know if that's right. I think it's more optimization for my life and my situation. For example, right, I got really deep into like the effective use of protein, right? So there's some models out there like you need to break up your protein 6 times a day, different meals, and hit your, close to 1 gram per pound body weight, whatever, right? 6 times a day. Well, that didn't work for me. I mean, I have 4 little kids, I work full time, and I train, and then I have some church responsibilities. So it's like, I tried it and it just wasn't working. I think that is probably the optimal way to do it. And you have an opinion on that, I'm sure. But for me, I'm like, hey, if I can break it up into 3 or 4 feedings, which may not be optimal based on the studies, but I'm still getting the protein I need and it's way less stress on me, like I'm going to do that.
Yeah. Oh, look, from a nutrition standpoint, I don't think there's a best approach that people can take, right? I think people chase perfection with nutrition, but there's just really it doesn't exist. And the book doesn't always really, I think we try to follow books, but in the 24 years of doing this and working with athletes, I've never followed the book to give them recommendations. It's what's working for them at that given time. And it's like these grams per kg and this and that. That's great for a classroom setting. It's not always good for reality and practice. So yeah, it's just, we got to go with what's working for you at the time.
Yeah. And so to answer your question, I think that is the secret sauce that I've found is there's so much information out there, whether it comes to training or nutrition or recovery or whatever. It's like, there's no way to do it all. And so I just kind of pick what I think looks good. And, obviously I have some advisors that I can consult with about that. And then I try it and I test the process. And so that testing is what I think is the essential part of things. Like trusting who's telling it to you, test it, and then look back and say, all right, did that work for me or did that not? For example, the thing I keep talking about, the feed cat system, I love it, but I found, unfortunately, the hard way, that there was the warm-up specific way that they teach is not right for me. And I learned that the hard way by having an injury right before the Paris Games, which caused me not to make the games. But I feel like the training system is the best there is. So now, as I contemplate whether I continue to train or retire, I'm still in that boat. I want to continue to work and train, but I have to say, okay, I'm going to adapt to that part of the training because I know that didn't work for me. So that's, I think, the bad part of me wanting to try things and optimize myself is I do get into a situation where some things don't work, and I learned that the hard way.
Excellent. Stay with us as we take a short break and thank our sponsors. You're listening to the Eat to Win podcast with your host, Tavis Pietol. Liquid Fuel is a new sports and hydration product formulated by a sports dietitian to give athletes the edge to train and compete longer. It contains the low glycemic carbohydrate platinose, designed to keep blood sugar levels more stable to provide energy for 3 to 4 hours without the blood sugar crash seen in other leading sports drinks. Its unique 4-part electrolyte formula includes 50% of your daily magnesium need to optimize muscle function. Liquid Fuel is naturally sweetened, along with no artificial ingredients or colors. Currently being used by high school, collegiate, and professional teams, Liquid Fuel allows you to live life with the confidence knowing you're properly fueling your body. Visit drinkliquidfuel.com and use the code MSD10 to get 10% off your offer. Welcome back to the Eat to Win podcast, where we're talking with Paralympian Tyson Gunter. Let's get back into this. Lots of questions left to really learn a lot about Tyson's background and really just his experience in this industry, especially around track and field. I want to kind of change the topics now around coaching and influence. You've also coached at the high school level. So I think that's something, if I go back and go, I would love to be a coach. And my wife's like, you need to go back and coach football and be an offensive coordinator. And I'm like, no, it's at almost 50 years old. It's not that simple. You just can't all of a sudden start a new career, leave it. I mean, you can, but it takes a lot of time. But I love the fact that, we talked about that and coaching at this level. How did working with younger athletes influence your own training philosophy?
Like I mentioned earlier, I think it totally opened my eyes to a new system of training, which I was planning to use on them because it just simplified things a lot more. I was still kind of in the mindset in the track and field world of like, even though I'm a long jumper, like I need to go out and run 5s and 600s and get in like really good base conditioning and spend a bunch of time in the weight room. And then as I ran across this idea, tried it on the high school kids and started seeing success at the high school level of like, let's focus on, if they're a sprinter, sprinting, and then recovering and adding in some plyometrics and some explosive stuff here and there, right? And that influenced me. I was trying to figure it out for them, to teach them and help them, because the high school kids, some, especially where we live in a rural area, it's not a lot of them are going to go on to college. We do. I have one athlete competing in college now, which is great, but not a lot are going to do it. They just want to do it for fun. They want to have a good time. They want to push themselves to get the most out of their specific body that they've been given. And so that's what I was trying to do. Just help them have the best success they can get for them individually which is another great thing about track and field, is like ultimately we all want to be the best out of everybody. But if you can just make yourself better and get the most out of yourself, like that's super cool to see kids that like PR and, they're just not good kids, but they're not athletic, I should say. But to see them get the most out of what they've been given is so exciting, and like their happiness and joy, like that's so fun.
It is.
So yeah, that's one of the things that as far as training goes. And then coaching in the long jump, right? As I teach technique, I go, holy crap, that's what my coach was talking about. Like I finally understood it, right? And that's cool too. That's been helpful for me.
Yeah, it is. Coaching does allow you to see a lot of things in yourself. And coaching, when my daughter Grace was a little bit 4 or 5 years ago, when she was 9, 10, yeah, she's 13 now, coaching her softball team, just park softball. And you see these kids and she doesn't play softball anymore. She's more competitive volleyball, but you could see these kids that they were just out there to do something. They were never probably going to go very far in that sport because they had other ideas but to see them get better, like couldn't hit a ball, didn't know anything about the sport, where to run, where the base was, anything about just the rules. And then by the end of the season, you were like, wow, that kid can hit the ball. They got better. They can field, they can throw. That just made you feel like so good just to see that development. So I love hearing about your story, and because I think that's why we get into that is it's about giving back and seeing those kids really give them an opportunity. So I love that aspect. Let's talk about adapting over time, right? Your training involved. How did your training evolve throughout your career as a Paralympian? Were there distinct phases where you had to completely rethink your approach? You've talked about some of the things you mentioned, the training system and things that might have not been best for you for the warm up, but anything along those lines that evolved to where you felt like I need to really rethink the approach I'm taking?
Yes, especially like over the last year, and there's been a few different situations, but when I found out about my mutation in my hips and the hip bones and that not working, like the physical therapist and trainer, like you have got to do a lot more work, like around those muscles, right? Around your glute max, your glute med, your hip flexors, your upper quads, like all of that stuff, your psoas. So I've had to evolve, and this is into doing way more of like banded hip work, monster walks, ladders with bands, like fire hydrant. And I don't know who knows or cares what these different exercises are, but they basically just strengthen your hips all the way around and your core around your hips, which because there's so much extra stress on those muscles as the ball of I think it's the top of my femur, I guess, as it kind of wobbles around in there. If I can strengthen everything around it, I don't know if it necessarily holds it in place, but it just helps prevent injury to a point in the rest of my legs. So that's been a huge thing. And it's hard because I only have so much time to train with my job and my family and all my other responsibilities. So I've had to maybe cut out some of the heavier lifting that I want to do or feel like I should do. And that's just at the point where I'm at, where I've had to make that decision. And again, going back to you figure out what's essential and what's going to work.
Now, let's kind of shift a little bit when you talk about training, your program, how to kind of rethink that approach. Let's talk about competition day preparation. I think that's an important thing because we all have, or at least I'm sure athletes of every sport have some sort of routine leading up to their event, game, et cetera, that's going to prepare them. On the day of an international competition, what did your preparation and warm-up routine look like? Anything specific? Did you follow the same routine? How was that choreographed?
Yes, I love that question. And I think about one of my big focuses was to make this shift into doing it with all my competitions, because in an international track and field competition, there's a lot more, I guess, pageantry involved and a lot more organization. And, at a local college track meet, which are open, so most athletes can compete, they're like, all right, long jump starts at 9:30 in the morning. So you get there at 8:30, you do your warm up and you show up at 9:29, and they're like, call your name and you're ready to go. International competition is you have to be in the call room an hour before the competition starts. So let's say, you have to be there. So for example, like I don't remember what time it was, but going into Paris, it was in the morning. It was probably like a 9 o'clock start, right? Had to be in the call room at 8 o'clock in the morning. So I had to be fully warmed up at that point to get into the call room. And I've tested this. This kind of goes back to the testing thing. Throughout the last couple of years, I tested like what's going to work best for me. So even at those college meets that I do where I could show up, I would always prepare early so that I could say, do I need to be like partially warmed up before I go into the call room? And then after I get out of the call room, do a little bit more. Do I need to be fully warmed up before I go in the call room? And then re-warm up when I get out. Like I was testing that and figured out for me, it's best if I'm fully warmed up so I can be able to sprint at full speed. I can jump, I'm flexible, I'm loose, everything feels good. And then I go into the call room and then we sit there. Or you can stand, like you have like a 2x2 square, right? There's a chair with your name on it. You can either stand in front of the chair or you can sit on the chair. There's not really a lot of room to do much else. And you're usually in there, they're checking your bag, they're making sure you don't have any colored liquid, which is super annoying from the nutrition standpoint, right? Because, you know, in Paris, we were out on the track for 3 hours and you could only have water. And it's like, I need Gatorade, I need something, right? So my coach was sneaking me stuff because I'd go over to talk to him and take a drink of Gatorade or whatever. But so they're checking all that. They're checking your spikes, make sure they're legal. There's so much that goes into this part in the call. They're putting tape on things, which because they're live broadcasts, if you don't have something that is a sponsored product, like they're taping over everything. They're taping over your bag. They're taping over your logos on your shoes. So it's just like, there's all this stuff going on. And then they're checking you for cell phones or whatever. And then that's about 20, 30 minute process. Then we walk out to, there's usually a warm-up track. And so depending on how long everything takes, they walk you out to the warm-up track. And then there's another, 10 minutes or so where you can just stay loose, get active. There's some room to do some drills or some short sprints. It's not super, super long track. And it's super busy, right? Because there's all the track events are in there too. And this is one of the hard things with the vision, right? Is because, and then all of us that are competing have similar vision. So we're all on this tight warm-up track with whatever track events are also on the warm-up track, getting ready for their track events. We're all kind of running around in there. So it's a little bit chaotic and maybe a little scary. You're going to run into somebody or whatever, or somebody will run into you. And then you get out on the track. It's usually about 10, 15 minutes to do some run-throughs on the long jump runway, and then the competition starts. So I know that's a really long answer. I warned you I was a little bit long-winded.
That's okay.
But I had to prepare and I had to test that process of, for me, getting warmed up. So when we go at 9 o'clock in the morning, I'm at the track at 7, and I don't like to get there and just like immediately go into warm up. I like to kind of walk around a little bit, kind of take some breaths, just relax. And then I get into my warm ups. 6:45, 7 o'clock, I like to get there so I can have 10, 15 minutes before I get into a warm up.
Excellent. Thanks for explaining that. That's really good to kind of hear how it works, at your level. And just because everybody's got something a little bit different. I want to shift now to motivation and inspiration. We all have athletes, someone we've looked up to, whether it's an athlete or non-athlete, that's really kind of motivated us, inspired us to keep moving or just to pursue something. Is there someone that you feel that has served as your greatest inspiration as you work toward Paralympic success?
That's a really great question. And it's changed over time. Michael Johnson, obviously, that was kind of my first spark of like, I really like track and field, and to see him win and throw the gold spikes up in the crowd, I'm like, dude, this is sweet. My older siblings that were athletes, and someone was coaching high school, and a couple did college track, like those guys were motivating and inspiring to me. When I got into college, I was a big fan of Maurice Green, who was a sprinter. I was really focused on sprinting stuff. I was best at jumps, but I didn't really follow jumpers too much because they never show them on TV. And we didn't really have a lot of access to the internet in the early 2000s. And so it was like, you saw who you saw, right? Stacy Dragila, obviously, because she went to the university that I lived next to, and it was a huge deal for her to go to the Sydney Olympics and win. And then going into later on in my life, other athletes or other people like Taysom Hill. You're in Louisiana, right?
Yeah.
Taysom Hill's story.
I'm
a huge BYU fan. He's from Pocatello, right here where right where I grew up. So,
nice.
So Taysom Hill has been lately an inspiration for me because of and my wife, I should say, because it's kind of crazy, but she was a college athlete. She was a heptathlete at Idaho State. That's where we met. And she had similar injuries not the same injuries, but similar severity injuries line up about the same time Taysom Hill did. And so to see him come out of that and just be as athletic or more in his work ethic, and then her kind of come out of her injuries and come back and compete. And so it's like, that's kind of changed my perspectives as I've gotten older, to see them and their success and their focus. And I mean, I could list so many more, because for me, it's like, it's a lot of tiny little things and a lot of people that I'll hear a quote from one person. I'm like, holy cow, today that helped me. And then the next day I'll hear something from somebody else and that'll help me that day. And I can't tell you what it was 2 months ago that inspired me that day, but it did. And it's helped me go a little farther along every day.
Excellent. Yeah. Taysom, it sucks to see what happened to him this year, because he's kind of the catalyst behind the Saints, although a lot of talent on that team. Started out really strong. He went down in that third game and it was like everything started to crumble, and so did a lot of other players. But then he comes back, get a little bit of a pickup, and then boom, tears his ACL. And it's like, of all
Right.
people, so hopefully he has a full recovery, and he continues to pursue his career in New Orleans, because we love him down here. He is just the Swiss Army knife, do everything. All right. There's a lot of athletes that face unique challenges like yourself, right? And not just in their pursuit of excellence, but just in challenges. But let's say we have people that want to pursue being an aspiring Paralympian like yourself. What advice would you give others that either saying, I want to do that, or I'm doing it, but I'm not doing it at the level that Tyson did? Any advice that you could give them?
Yeah, I heard, again, my teammate in college, and then he became my physical therapist. He said something like, Olympians, Paralympians, or elite athletes are willing to do what other people aren't willing to do. And so I think that is one thing that I've internalized. The thing is, though, with social media, what most people will think of when they hear that is, oh, I got to practice before practice. I got to be in the gym at 4 a.m. like Kobe Bryant was. And I love Kobe Bryant, but I just don't think his work ethic was feasible for most people. And I think he had the opportunity to recover in a way that people don't realize as well, right? He might have been in the gym at 4, but he was still getting 8-10 hours of sleep somehow, somewhere, right? In my opinion, I don't know. But anyway, I think when people hear like, do what your other people aren't, they hear that. When I was in high school, I read a book on Michael Johnson called Slaying the Dragon. And I haven't been able to really find it anywhere, but there's one thing out in there that stood out to me. And he talked about when he was in college at Baylor, he had to decide if he was going to go to bed or go out and party with his teammates. And he said, I'm going to go to bed. And so I think recovery or eating the way most people aren't willing to do, or caffeine, right? I mean, we could talk about nutrition. I am a huge proponent of using caffeine as a performance tool. But when I try to talk to high school kids about it or whatever, like, how many people are willing to limit their caffeine before 11 a.m. in the morning and not take very much until it matters on those very specific days and times, that then you do your, what the book says to use for caffeine? Not very many people are willing to do that. Most people are like, I don't care. I'm going to drink a Coke or a Monster or whatever later in the day because I'm tired and I can still sleep, even though they don't realize that it's still messing up their hormone release and everything like that, right? So I think little things like that, or like, hey, and again, for me, this works for me. I'll be sitting there and like, I get crap in the office, and even though, a lot of people here are pretty healthy, but it's like, because of my situation and time, I don't have a lot of time to prepare food. So I might just be cracking open a couple of cans of tuna and throwing some salt or mustard or whatever and eating it, and then having a bag of spinach that I'm just eating. It's gross. I don't like it, but it's what I need to do to fuel. I'm eating for fuel and not for pleasure, which I get enough pleasure in my eating throughout, in certain times. But so I would say willing to do what most people aren't willing to do. And that could be recovery, that could be eating, that could be optimizing your supplement or caffeine or whatever.
Love it. Let's talk about just your achievements. A couple of more questions. You've achieved a lot, but if you can summarize your journey in one statement, what would you want people to understand about the process that you took to becoming a Paralympian?
That I did. That's a good question.
You may have said it. You got to do things that make you uncomfortable. You got to do things that are others are willing to do, which I try to tell my daughter things like that. Like, look, I read something in the paper. She's a very good volleyball player, but there's a long ways to go, just like any young person. But I try to tell her before every game, make people know who you are and just let that resonate, because that's what another athlete parent told. I was like, I love that. Like, make them know who you are. Show them the dominance that you have on the court. And when you said, I got to do other things that other people will not do to get me to this level. And I was like, all right, I'm going to tell her that too. I was like, I'm taking that with me.
Yeah. And remember to tell her that sometimes it means not working hard. Like sometimes it's hard to not do something, right? Christian McCaffrey's a great example. His coach, Brian Kula, was a track coach, and I get a lot of inspiration from him. And he said, while training Christian, which is cool that somebody hired a track coach to train their speed, but he talks about how one of his hardest things was telling Christian, hey, you got to stop, you got to wait, you got to rest, you got to whatever, because he just wanted to go. So that's something people aren't willing to do, is to stop and rest. But I think to answer your question, I'll say this, there's a lot of things, but I think overcoming failure by testing the process. I'm really big on process goals. I have a whole framework around setting goals and achieving goals. And the main part of that is the process of those goals. Small, consistent actions over and over and over and over and over again, which has helped me in everything, whether it's motivation or nutrition or training or recovery. It's doing those little small things over and over and over again that you can control. And then at the end, you just kind of have to say, whatever the outcome is, and as long as I can have confidence that I went through the process, that's all that matters.
Love it. That's great take home point. Let's talk about your legacy and influence, because based on what you've accomplished, you have the ability to influence so many people and leave a great legacy. So how do you hope your story will inspire or guide the next generation of athletes, whether it's a Paralympian or just somebody like, my daughter? When she watches this, I want her to see this and say, I want you to see what Tyson did and overcame. So what can you do to maybe inspire others? Or how do you hope your story will inspire?
I haven't got into this too much, but I would have loved to got into Paralympics earlier. And so I just hope that the people, or maybe those with, it doesn't matter what disability, but if you have a physical disability, and if you're watching this and you know somebody with physical disability, like, just understand that there is an elite level organization for athletes in that place, which is a huge blessing in our modern society, right? And even if it's just recreationally, I just feel that the power of competing in sports has even if it's just for that little bit of time, just has an opportunity to make us happy, to make us, hopefully better people, work together with people better. I'm still trying to, do my best and compete and be the best I can be. And I hope that maybe I can be an example for other people that are trying to do that too.
Love it. Yeah.
I mean, I don't feel like that was a great answer for you, so I'm sorry, but I don't look at myself, I guess, as a motivator or an inspirer.
Yeah.
I wish, and maybe that'll change over time as I do get older and I quit. I mean, obviously I'm a coach and I try to share what I've learned with my athletes, but I don't answer that question well because I don't maybe believe that I'm an inspiration yet, if that makes sense.
No, you're humble, and that's a great trait to have. At the same time, yes, you are an incredible inspiration to a lot. And I can understand not maybe feeling that way, because there's just a lot of people out there that are humble about it. It's not, they don't let their accomplishments kind of dictate their ego. And that's great. And that's someone like yourself. It's the same thing with what I've kind of maybe presented at a lot of conferences. Oh my God, that's a great presentation. To me, it's like, it's just a job. I don't ever want to be remembered by my job, but if it influences others, then that's awesome. I'm happy to do that. And I think for someone like yourself, you've accomplished something that very few people in this world will ever accomplish. So I think we need to look at ways to show those others that are trying to get to that level. And maybe they won't, most people, like you said, won't get to the Olympic level. Very few will, but it will help maybe motivate them to get a college scholarship or to play at the next level, or even just pursue something to go, maybe I'm not good enough. And that kind of leads to my next question, because a lot of people doubt themselves. They just go, I don't have that talent. Or they put themselves and try to compete and look at others and go, am I that good? Am I better than so-and-so, right? We all do that. What message, for those that are doubting their own potential, is there something that you would want them to leave with today to say, you know what, here's a way to overcome?
Yeah, I think compete against yourself. That's one of the huge blessings or one of the best things about track and field is you compete against yourself. There's probably other sports that you're able to do that. And I know it's hard because ultimately we do want to be recognized and like, I'm not, like you said, I try to be pretty humble, but it still feels good when you're recognized and people tell you good job or that you inspired them or you helped them achieve a goal that they didn't think they could. So, but at the end of the day, I think if you're the best version of yourself, and I mentioned at the first of this, that's what motivated me is I feel like I still haven't become the best version of myself. So I'm still motivated to keep trying. And I think that's the message that everybody should have, because ultimately you competing against other people is out of your control. That's not a controllable outcome. What you can control is you being the best you can be. And it takes time. You can't just all of a sudden wake up and, feel sorry for yourself and then wake up the next day and be like, all right, I'm motivated. I'm going to be the best person of myself. But just slowly keep telling yourself that over time and trying your best. It's like we talked about. It's seeing the kid that just does their best and may not even make it to, a district or state level championship in high school, but knowing that they did their best. Kind of going back, we talked about Taysom Hill a lot. He said the first time he got hurt at BYU, he said, I can't compete on the field, so I'm going to go compete in the classroom. So he found a place for him to go and do his best, even though it wasn't what he wanted. And so I think we can take the skills that we've learned of trying to be our best, and you might not be the best in a sport, but you can be the best. I think Nick Saban said this once, you can be the best street sweeper in the world. And if that's what you are, or if you're a street sweeper, your goal should be the best street sweeper in the world. So I think that's kind of cool.
And that's an important job. I mean, every job, I think, from bottom to top is important. Without the people on the bottom or whatever, they don't have the success, for the company in general. So I love that statement. I think that's something important. Last question, 2 parts. First, share one piece of advice that listeners can kind of apply to their own training, regardless of their starting point. What's one piece of advice as we leave today's podcast that they can take with them when it comes to their own training?
Figure out what you want and then find the most essential thing to do to get what you want. That may be a little vague, but there's just so much information out there. If you're like, hey, I want to lose weight, you Google it. There's a million different options. I want to, be faster. There's a million different options. I want to be a good marketer or dietitian or whatever. There's a million different options, right? So I think just finding one thing that's essential and then sticking to that and being consistent.
I love it. I love the consistency piece. James Clear, one of my favorite books is Atomic Habits. And it's like, get 1% better. Just get 1% better every day, every week. And that leads to about a 40 to 45% improvement in the year, which for most people, they don't have the patience to get 1% better. That's not fast enough, right? And I think, like the new year's coming, a lot of people are going to go on these weight loss journeys, and 80 to 90% are going to give up probably within the first week or two from what I've read. And a lot of it's due to the lack of being perfect. And I'm like, there's no perfection. Stop chasing perfection. But anyway, all right, last question. How does our audience get in touch with you, or just how do they, learn more about your journey? If they want to reach out, follow you, how do they stay connected with you?
Probably through Instagram. It's Tyson Gunter _PLY, which PLY stands for Paralympian. A lot of people are confused about that. So yeah. So I'm on there. I'm trying to be better on there. So yeah, that's going to be the best place. And then I do run an athlete program where I work at a Black Label Supplements. I run a program for athletes where we try to educate on sports nutrition and proper supplementation. And so I'm really active there. I run that program, so people can reach out that way, or Instagram.
Awesome. Well, we're going to have that in the show notes for people to reach out. We're not done, because some things that you're not aware of, I'm going to have a couple of curveball questions for you. Nothing to do with today's topic. I just like to throw these things in there for fun. The first question is me being selfish, because I love music probably more than just about anything besides sports. So I want to kind of get your opinion and see what's your background. If you could be the lead singer of any musical group today in the past, who would that be?
Man, well, I love the Goo Goo Dolls. That's my favorite band. So,
Okay.
but I
Buffalo.
wouldn't want to take Johnny Resnick's job.
Right.
So I don't know. That would be a good one though, because I love that. I love jamming out. I like country music too. So
Okay.
there's some good bands there too.
Yeah, I play guitar. I can play Name, and my daughter and I have done some, we've done a few of their songs, Black Balloon, at open mic night. So still a band I have not seen live, or the Goo Goo Dolls. They don't come to New Orleans like ever. So
yeah, man, I got to see them live once. They came to Boise, which I'm in eastern Idaho. They came to Boise. It was right after my wife tore her Achilles doing hurdles. Like 2 weeks later, she's in a boot, and I'm like, we're going because we're going. And so, I mean, she was super awesome. She hobbled around the streets of Boise in a boot, and I had to, piggyback her, but we got to see the Goo Goo Dolls live, and it was awesome.
Nice. Yeah, Boise's a great area. I still, Red Rocks is a dream. I'm still waiting to try to get to that, but been to Boise once, and Idaho is just a beautiful area. All right. Last question. Let's go back to your younger self, Tyson, today. If you could go back to young Tyson, what would you tell yourself, let's say when you were maybe starting college, younger, just any piece of advice?
So I would say, if it was in high school, I would say gain 80 pounds and be a lineman. Because I love track and field is my favorite sport, but I feel like I'm pretty athletic and you don't have to see as good to be a lineman. But when you're in high school, nobody wants to be a lineman. I'm 6'5". If I would have put on 80 pounds, dude, where would I have been today? That's just a random thing, but
I love it. I was an offensive lineman in high school. That's so much fun. Now, if I had to go back, I'd say, give me your 6'5" height or 6'4" height, because that's the one thing. I was at 5'11" and a half at 260. I was like,
there you go.
I had the talent. I didn't have to. I couldn't play D1 at 5'11". It's like that's
right.
You got to be at least 6'3", and that might get you a position at at center.
Right.
No, love it, Tyson. Thank you so much today. Just incredible information. Thanks for spending your time with us to give your story, everything that you went through, all your insight. I think it's going to be just incredible information for people to take back and just look back at this and go, all right, this is something that I need to lay out a plan, really focus on goals. So really appreciate your time.
And thank you again. Like I started with this the episode with this, but I really appreciate what you guys are doing at My Sports Dietitian. And I hope everybody can take advantage of that maybe listening to this with your high school athletes is, and maybe this is the second answer to your question is, I didn't even start taking nutrition seriously till a couple of years ago. Man, if I was interested in it in high school, but it was always the, supplements or protein, whatever. Like I didn't totally understand nutrition. I wish I would have. That was, I think, maybe the second thing that's more of a serious thing of like, and you eat right. Who knows where I could have been. And I've had great success. Don't get me wrong. But yeah, so thank you for all you're doing and supporting and the education on sports nutrition for high school coaches and athletes. What you're doing is awesome.
Thanks. Really appreciate it. Well, until next time, that's it for today's episode of the Eat to Win podcast show. Big thanks to Tyson Gunter for joining us and sharing the story of his Paralympic journey and the training it took to get there. If you found today's insights valuable, be sure to like, subscribe, and share with your community. Also, do us a big favor and rate and review us. Until next time, keep winning.
Thanks for joining us on the Eat to Win show. Remember, every meal is a step toward victory. Until next time, stay strong and keep winning.